I want to talk to you a little bit about feedback mechanisms and some of the language that College Board uses and ways that you can expect to apply this topic on the AP exam. So feedback mechanisms are used by organisms in order to do one of two things. They are either going to maintain an internal environment in an organism, or it is going to be used to respond to internal and external environmental changes. So I'm going to start by going over negative feedback loops. Negative feedback loops are used by organisms in order to maintain homeostasis. So if a system is disrupted or moved from its ideal, the negative feedback loop is going to work to return the system back to its target set point, or back to normal. In your notebook, there's an activity on feedback loops that shows a diagram of a very generalized negative feedback loop. So in this feedback loop, you can see that there is a stimulus and a signal is sent in order for it to respond. That response is going to, in turn, decrease that stimulus, which will bring it back to normal. You can also look at a graph kind of like this. This is going to represent whatever internal environment this organism is trying to maintain through the negative feedback loop. Let's say that we are talking about internal body temperature. This arrow that I've drawn here, this line that's moving across time, is going to represent the target set point, or the normal body temperature, or the ideal factor of whatever environment the example is talking about. In this case, temperature. So we're talking about humans. The average body temperature is around 98 degrees. So if your body temperature gets too hot, let's say you go outside, your body is going to respond to that through a negative feedback loop in order to return your internal body temperature back to that normal temperature by sweating. Now, on the other end of that spectrum, if your body temperature drops lower than the ideal set point, then your body is going to use that negative feedback loop by shivering your muscles in order to bring your body temperature back up to normal. The whole idea of negative feedback loops is that whenever the stimulus triggers a response, that response is going to lower the stimulus. You're trying to get the organism back to homeostasis. Now, positive feedback loops are used to amplify responses in processes. So this is used in order to respond to either internal or external environmental changes. The difference here is that the variable that we're talking about that's going to initiate the response is actually going to be moved further away from that initial set point. So if we look at another generalized graph or diagram of a positive feedback loop, you can see that there is a stimulus, which is going to send a signal in order to cause a response. But in this case, the response is actually going to increase the stimulus. So what ends up happening is the amplification of that stimulus. So the stimulus is further activated and initiates an additional response. Another way to look at this is if you have a graph like such. My y-axis represents the amount of stimulus, and the x-axis represents the time. So if you initially have a small amount of your stimulus, that is going to signal a response to increase that stimulus. Then that increased amount of stimulus is going to signal another response to further increase that stimulus, and so on and so forth. Now, as far as the AP test is concerned and what College Board expects you to do with this information, there's a few things that you'll need to be able to do, because College Board will not use the same examples that we go over, but you'll have to be able to apply these. The first thing you'll have to be able to do is to identify the type of feedback that's occurring in their example that they give you, if it's negative or if it's positive. You'll also have to probably predict what would happen in different scenarios. So what would happen if you add a certain stimulus, or if you subtract a certain stimulus, or if the environment is moved in one direction or the other.